Today, we're going to go through the process of adding the SuperStrut to the array. This is a fairly simple and straightforward process that mainly just takes a bit of time to get done properly. Depending on where the SuperStrut needs to be will be how you put it onto the array. I got a bit unlucky and had my strut land on every single arm of the array, so you'll see both methods that I used for attaching it here. Since we need 15 feet of SuperStrut and can only buy it in 10-foot sections, we'll need to splice together two pieces. Normally, I would weld these two pieces together, but I'm trying my best here to make this array as DIY as possible for as many people as possible, and I know welding definitely takes it out of that realm. The solution I found in the meantime is to use these splice plates that are designed for SuperStrut. From side to side, these plates don't do much. Thankfully, for our purpose, we need strength up and down, and that's where these things are insanely strong for that. For the piece of SuperStrut that are in between arms, we're going to use this method to connect them together, where we sandwich the SuperStrut between two plates with four 2.5-inch long, 1/2-inch screws with a washer between the bolt head and nut on either side of the plates. Make sure as you tighten everything down that the SuperStrut stays straight and in line. Sometimes it can move side to side on you. You can either put these together on the ground or up on the array. I ended up doing most of them up on the array for the most part. For spacing, we need a total of 82 inches, in my case, which is the width of my panels. Knowing that I want an 18-inch overhang on my first panel, and my last one, I measure from the end of the array out 46 inches and make my next mark. From that mark, you can mark either 18 inches from there, which would be a total of 82 inches, and indicate where the panel will end, or just go 36 inches, which would give you the 18 inches from the edge of the panel for the next piece of SuperStrut. When marking where I want the strut to go, I also add an arrow to indicate which side of the mark I want my SuperStrut sitting on. This just makes sure that I keep everything consistent. With the next two locations marked, I'm going to go through adding the strut to the array. I want the strut to overhang the top and bottom of the array the same amount. For me, this is 15 3/4 inches. I got this number by subtracting the length of the array, 148.5 inches, from the total length of the strut, 180 inches, and dividing that by 2. You'll want to mark both ends of the strut for where you want it to sit on the array, as the wood is never perfectly straight and may have warped already. I know mine did, so your wooden frame could be a bit wonky, and the strut will help keep it back in line. When it comes to attaching the strut to the array, I'm using 3.5-inch 3/8-inch lag bolts with a washer. Since I don't want to potentially split the 2x6s, I'm pre-drilling all of my holes with a 15/64 drill bit. An odd size, I know, but that's what a 3/8-inch lag bolt actually calls for a pilot hole. Ideally, all of the holes would be centered on the 2x6s, but sadly not all of them quite are. Just get them as close as you can to the center to prevent blowing out the 2x6. Put the first lag bolt in the bottom of the array, but don't fully tighten it, as you'll need to adjust the strut slightly to get it all aligned on the other boards. Also, be a bit smarter than me and alternate your strut for where you have the splice. I put them all on the top, which actually was enough weight to take the array out of balance a bit. If you alternate having the splice at the top and then the bottom, it would mitigate that issue. Ultimately, it's not an issue at the end of the day, as once you put the panels on, it's likely to be a little out of balance anyway. Before putting the strut on individually, I highly recommend measuring and marking all of the locations where the strut will go to make sure you have your math right and everything lines up where you need it to be. I personally was really hoping I'd mess up my math and wasn't going to have my strut directly on the arms if I went from the other direction. Unfortunately, I mathed correctly and it was the same both ways, which I mean, that's good. It means I did it right. But it's annoying attaching the strut onto the arms. This section of video was 25 minutes, which is just attaching 2 pieces of strut. I'm going to let this video go at a slower speed for this first piece of strut, since the attaching method is different since it's on one of the arms, and then speed it up and then end everything with the time lapse. With that said, attaching the strut to an arm is pretty simple overall. You'll need to splice the strut together on the arm instead of away from the array, as the strut that goes on the arm only uses one plate. You'll use a plate on top of the strut, and then use the lag bolts to go through the top plate, and then through the strut and into the arm of the array. Since the arm supports the bottom of the strut, there isn't a need for the plate underneath. And technically, you could argue that you don't need a plate at all, since you can just add additional lag bolts where the 2 pieces line up, but I like the additional security against movement that the plate adds. Plus, I bought 20 of these, so I might as well use as many as I can, right? Right? Maybe. While this is playing out, we'll go through our usual shilling of things for the channel. As always, if you like the content I'm putting out, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content as it comes out. We still have a few more videos coming out for just this series alone, including actually putting the panels on the array, which we'll see how that one turns out, as well as the mechanism we'll be using for tilting it and locking it in place. I just have to figure out which method that will be. I'm going through the idea of using a trailer jack, a bottle jack, linear actuators, which would be kind of cool, or just doing it by hand with a 2-block, which most likely would be the one we go with for the most DIY solution. And I mean, if we're being honest here, I'm leaning more towards the 2-block, not only because it's the more DIY version, but it's easier for anyone to get simple adjustments. And the whole system is honestly light enough to just move by hand without the assistance of a jack or actuator. I just like the idea of the actuators because it'd be cool to have it all automated. Now, I've received a few comments and some feedback about the strength of this array. I'll admit that I can't answer how strong it is or how well it would hold up to higher winds, as I don't really care if it can or can't do so. It's a ground-mounted solar array. If you're in an area that gets bad storms and high winds like I am, where hurricanes hit, I'm not leaving my panels up anyway. I'd be taking them all down and storing them in a shed, not because I'm scared that the wind will take them away, which is always a possibility of course, but I'm more concerned about garbage and branches flying into them and damaging them. The other thing, with a tiltable array, you can technically set it to 90 degrees and mitigate the vast majority of lift and wind load that hits them. You just have to make sure you do so before the high winds actually hit, of course. There are also linear actuator systems that can do it automatically for you. I've obviously never played with one, so I can't speak to them, but I do know they exist. I'm also entertaining the idea of adding rear support via cable tension to keep the 4x6 posts under compression, so they're less likely to break if there is some freak massive wind load on the system at some point. Now we move on to the 2000 photo time-lapse to finish everything up. Now I'm curious, do you guys prefer the time-lapse method like this, or the video method where it's sped up in ungodly amounts, like 2500% sometimes, like the prior section? Let me know down in the comments below. And with the SuperStrut added to the frame of the array, we can move on to adding the panels to everything, which will be the next video that comes out. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.